My daughter-in-law slapped a number down on the table, $500,000, and told me straight up, pay it, or I'm out of the family. I didn't argue. I didn't fight back. I just gave them 3 days. On the 3rd day, my phone had 98 missed calls, and nothing had changed in their account. The only thing that changed was me. You pay the $500,000 in debts or you're no longer our mother. Those words hung in the air like thick smoke in my clean kitchen in a quiet, upscale neighborhood outside Seattle. My daughter-in-law, Lauren, brushed a perfectly manicured strand of hair from her face as she slid the demand across the polished granite island. My son, Ryan, just stared at his shoes, too weak to look me in the eye. He'd always been more like her shadow, echoing her endless hunger for a lifestyle they couldn't afford. I sat there in my usual spot, feeling the cool countertop under my palms. This house was where I'd raised Ryan. This was where I'd cared for my husband through his final days. I knew they had money trouble. Ryan had overextended himself on some risky real estate deals, egged on by Lauren's appetite for the kind of life that came with luxury cars and designer everything. But demanding my inheritance like it was their personal safety net, that was a whole new level of disrespect. Lauren watched me expecting tears. She figured I'd panic and pull out my checkbook just to keep the peace. They thought a 68-year-old widow would be too terrified of being alone to say no. To them, I was just an ATM with gray hair. Ryan cleared his throat softly but said nothing to defend me. He'd already picked his side. I stood up slowly, back, straight voice, as calm as still water on a quiet morning. If that's the price for staying in your family, I said simply, then I'm done. I grabbed my car keys from the hook, picked up my purse, and walked out the door. No yelling, no drama. I just left the house that was legally mine alone and drove straight to the bank. I had exactly 3 days to get my life in order before their world started to crumble. I sat in my car for a moment, took a deep breath, and felt the racing heartbeat fade into something cold and crystal clear, pure resolve. I didn't head to the store or call a friend. First stop was the local credit union downtown. I'd known the branch manager for 20 years. Good morning, I told him. I need to revoke every single power of attorney I ever gave my son, effective immediately. He nodded professionally, no questions asked. He could see the steel in my eyes. Ryan had that emergency access, and he'd already been dipping in for little advances over the past few months. That ended today. While the paperwork printed, I logged into my online banking and changed every password. Lauren had tried snooping on my balances behind my back more than once. She thought she'd already taken control of my money. She was dead wrong. After that, I drove to a small hardware store on the edge of town where nobody knew me. I bought 3 new deadbolts for the exterior doors. I wasn't about to wait around for them to show up in the middle of the night. When I got home, Ryan and Lauren were already gone, probably out celebrating their victory over an expensive dinner they'd soon struggle to afford. I grabbed tools from the basement and swapped out the front door lock. It was simple, mechanical work that actually felt soothing. In the kitchen, I made myself a pot of tea. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Lauren. We expect confirmation of the transfer by Friday noon. Don't mess this up. I set the phone aside without replying and started making a list. Not a list of complaints, just cold, hard facts. I reviewed all the automatic monthly transfers I'd been making for Ryan's rent and Lauren's fancy SUV lease payments. With one click, I canceled every single one. The faucet was officially turned off. The next morning felt unusually quiet. Normally, Lauren would have already called, ordering me to pick up the grandkids from school or handle their weekly grocery run, always on my dime, of course. But today, the phone stayed silent. They probably figured I was holed up in my bedroom agonizing over the money. Instead, I walked through my house and really looked at all the things they'd taken for granted. Lauren had claimed the West Wing as her home office a year earlier. She'd filled it with expensive designer furniture and shoved my old family heirlooms down to the basement. I went in there and started packing her stuff into boxes, nice and methodical. It was my house, and I was taking my space back. I didn't feel angry, just a deep, quiet relief. Every box I sealed felt like another piece of my freedom coming home to me. Around lunchtime, I drove to that upscale organic market where Lauren always shopped on my account. I spoke briefly with the owner. "Starting today," I said, with a small smile, "please don't put any more purchases on my tab unless I'm the one making them in person. My son and daughter-in-law will be paying cash from now on." His expression shifted for a second, but he nodded. He got it right away. Back home, I spotted Lauren's SUV cruising down the street in the distance. They didn't even stop. They headed straight to their rented place, totally convinced I was busy wiring that $500,000. They had no idea I'd already dismantled their entire financial setup. The monthly support, the gas cards, the delivery services gone. I sat in my garden, watched the birds, and breathed easy. It was a beautiful day, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like the family servant. The countdown had started, and the quiet before the storm actually felt kind of nice. Thursday morning brought the first reaction. It wasn't Ryan, it was Lauren. She must have tried to pay at the bakery or gas station and realized the card I'd loaned her was now blocked. My phone lit up 10 missed calls in a single hour. I ignored everyone. I sat in my sunroom with a book I'd started years ago. The peace was absolute. Around noon, I heard tires squealing out front. It was Ryan. I watched from the window as he climbed out, looking pale and exhausted, marching straight for the front door. He jammed his key in the lock. Nothing. He tried again, rattled the handle, even kicked the door. I cracked open an upstairs window just a bit. "The key doesn't work anymore, Ryan," I called down calmly. He looked up, face twisted with fury and shock. "Mom, what the hell, we're in trouble. Lauren can't access the money and the landlord called. Why'd you stop the automatic payments?" He was practically shouting. I looked at him and didn't see a grown man, just a little boy who'd never learned to own his mistakes. "You gave me an ultimatum on Tuesday," I answered. "I made my choice. I'm not your mother anymore, and a stranger doesn't pay your rent." He stammered something about it being a misunderstanding, and Lauren was just stressed. I simply closed the window. He stood on the sidewalk for another 10 minutes, calling my name and staring at the locked door. Then he got back in his car and drove off. I knew this was only the beginning. $500,000 was a huge number, but losing my daily support would break them much faster. Without my help, they couldn't even make it through the week. I went to the kitchen and fixed myself a simple lunch. The power balance had finally shifted. Friday morning, the deadline dawned peaceful. I'd slept like a baby. I'd left my phone in the kitchen overnight. When I turned it on after breakfast, I could hardly believe it. 45 missed calls and a flood of texts. Lauren was threatening. Ryan was begging. The tone flipped every 10 minutes between rage and raw desperation. They were completely out of options. I drove into downtown Seattle for an appointment with my financial advisor. I wanted to make sure my will and all my legal documents were ironclad. "You seem very determined today," he noted. I signed the papers that officially removed Ryan as my primary heir as long as he stayed married to her. Instead, I set up a foundation for disadvantaged kids. This wasn't about revenge. It was about protecting what I'd built. As I left the office, I spotted Ryan and Lauren sitting in a cafe across the street. They looked wrecked. Lauren was on the phone frantic while Ryan had his head buried in his hands. They didn't see me. I watched for a moment. They looked like two people who'd just realized their house of cards had no foundation. Without my $500,000, the creditors would be banging on their door come Monday. I got back in my car and drove down to the waterfront. I took a long walk along the shore. My phone kept buzzing in my pocket. The missed calls climbed to 60, then 80. I felt no pity anymore. When you try to blackmail your own mother, you forfeit the right to sympathy. They thought they could control me by threatening to take away the family, but they forgot they were the ones who needed me financially, logistically, emotionally. I'd been their anchor, and they'd cut the rope. Now they were drifting straight toward the rocks. I enjoyed the fresh breeze and the sight of the big ships passing by. It was Friday afternoon, 3 o'clock. Banks would be closing soon. In Lauren's world, this was Judgment Day. My phone now showed 98 missed calls. The messages had turned frantic and rambling. Please, the debt collectors are at the door. One text from Ryan read. A small smile crossed my face. He was lying. Debt collectors don't just show up unannounced on a Friday afternoon over real estate trouble. He was still trying cheap drama. I decided to send them one single reply. I typed 2 words, too late, nothing more. No explanations, no argument. I powered the phone completely off and tucked it in a hallway drawer. Then I went down to the cellar and pulled out a good bottle of wine I'd been saving for a special occasion. Today was that occasion. I was celebrating my independence. The neighborhood was quiet. I knew they'd probably show up soon to cause a scene. I called the security company that monitored my alarm system. Hi, this is Margaret Hayes. I'm expecting some uninvited family members this evening. Please send a patrol by if anyone tries to enter my property without permission. I don't want to press charges, just have them removed. Confirmation came right away. In this country, property rights and home security are powerful tools when you use them right. I sat on the terrace with my glass of wine as the sun dipped toward the horizon. I thought about that $500,000. It would have solved Ryan's problems for now, but it would have only made Lauren hungrier. They would have drained me dry. By saying no, I hadn't just saved my money, I'd saved my dignity. Real wealth isn't the balance in your account. It's the ability to decide your own life. In the distance, I heard a car approaching. The final act was here. Just as expected, my son's car rounded the corner and stopped right in front of my closed garden gate. Ryan and Lauren got out together. Lauren looked like she was on the verge of a breakdown, hair-messy voice, shrill as she rattled the metal gate. Margaret, open up. You can't do this to us. We're losing everything, she screamed through the bars. I stayed seated calmly on the terrace, wine glass in hand about 50 feet away. You told me I wasn't your mother anymore? I called back evenly. I don't open my door to strangers after dark. Please, leave my property. Ryan looked desperate. Mom, the bank froze the account. We can't even fill up the gas tank. Lauren pawned Grandma's jewelry, but it's not enough. That was interesting. So they'd already started selling off family heirlooms. Another reason I'd never give in. That's your problem now, Ryan, I said. You're both adults. Lauren cursed loudly and tried climbing the gate, but her high heels made it impossible. Right then, the security company's truck pulled into the driveway. 2 strong guys in uniform stepped out and approached politely but firmly. Good evening. The owner doesn't want you here. Please get back in your vehicle and leave. Lauren tried arguing, waving her arms in the guard's face, but Ryan tugged her sleeve and pulled her back. He finally saw the truth. He saw his mother not crying, not giving in, fully in control. They got in the car without another word and drove away. Quiet returned to the neighborhood. I took one last sip of wine. It was done. Saturday morning was the most peaceful I'd had in years. No phone blowing up, no demands. I knew they were probably crashing with Lauren's parents or begging friends for help. But my house was my fortress again. I started the day by calling a landscaper. I wanted to redo the garden, get rid of those sterile plants Lauren had chosen, and bring in wildflowers and old-fashioned roses. I was finally spending my money on things that brought me joy. I walked into town for fresh pastries. Neighbors greeted me like always. No one knew about the drama behind closed doors, and that was just fine. I felt light. The fear of losing Ryan that had paralyzed me for years was gone. I hadn't lost him. I'd lost the illusion that he truly loved me. And that realization set me free. In the afternoon, I finished clearing out Lauren's things from the West Wing. I found a hidden notebook where she'd meticulously listed how much she expected to inherit after I was gone. She'd even calculated how she'd sell the house and invest the proceeds. I read it without anger. It only confirmed I'd made the right call. To her, I'd just been an obstacle standing between her and the good life. I called an old friend I'd neglected because of Ryan and Lauren. Evelyn, it's Margaret. Want to take a trip? I was thinking the California coast next month. We laughed on the phone like schoolgirls. I realized how much I'd sacrificed trying to meet everyone else's expectations. Now it was my turn. I had my house, my money, and my time back. Ryan and Lauren would have to learn what it meant to stand on their own. It was the toughest lesson I could give them and the most honest one. 2 weeks passed. I heard through the grapevine that Ryan and Lauren had to move out of their place. They were now squeezed into a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts far from the nice neighborhood. Ryan had taken a second job just to cover the interest payments. Lauren was supposedly working part-time at a boutique. Their pride was shattered, their arrogance gone. The $500,000 debt was still there, but now they were scraping together small payments. One day a package showed up on my doorstep. It contained some of my old heirlooms they hadn't sold yet, along with a short note from Ryan. "I'm sorry, Mom. I messed everything up. Lauren and I just fight all the time now. I don't know if we're going to make it." I read it twice. It wasn't another plea for money, just the raw admission of failure. But I didn't reply right away. A letter didn't erase years of disrespect. I spent the afternoon packing my suitcase for the coast. I looked at photos of my husband. He would have been proud. He would have wanted me to stand up for myself. I felt like I'd finally closed the book on the past. My house was peaceful again, not a place of blackmail. All of Lauren's boxes had been donated or tossed. I stepped into the garden and saw the first buds on the new roses. It felt like a symbol of my fresh start. I was in my late 60s, but my life felt brand new. I'd learned you can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, and money can never buy love. Ryan would have to find his own way without my safety net. Maybe one day he'd become a better man carrying the weight of his own choices. Until then, I was unavailable. I locked the front door and headed to the airport. The world was big, and I was finally ready to see it. 3 months later, I sat on my terrace enjoying the view of the water. The trip had opened my eyes. I wasn't the lonely widow people could push around anymore. I was Margaret Hayes, a woman who had claimed her place in life. Ryan sent occasional messages with short updates about his days. He and Lauren had split. She couldn't handle living without the luxuries and had moved on to another man who could hopefully give her more. Ryan was working hard, paying down his debts, little by little. He didn't ask for money anymore. Instead, he asked for recipes or memories of his dad. We were slowly rebuilding, but on an entirely new footing. He came to visit sometimes, but he no longer had a key. We'd sit in the garden with coffee, and he respected my boundaries. He finally understood the house was mine and my money was mine. The roles were clear at last. I'd hired some help around the house and started volunteering with the foundation I'd set up to receive my estate one day. It filled me with real satisfaction knowing my money would eventually do good instead of funding Lauren's shopping sprees. I'd used my financial control to create fairness for myself and for others. People often say blood is thicker than water, but I'd learned that respect is the real foundation of any relationship. Without it, family is just a word too often used to manipulate and control. I'd broken the chains of other people's expectations. Ryan was still my son, but now he was a responsible guest in my life, not a parasite. I looked out at the water and smiled. I was 68 years old. I was on my own. But I had never felt lonelier than when I was twisting myself into knots trying to please everyone. Now I belonged to myself. That was the most precious gift I'd ever given. Family isn't a place where your kindness comes with a price tag. Sometimes you don't lose them, you just stop financing them.